Alright, it is Sunday, September 14th, and the plan for today is to keep working on my objective system. I would like to make it so I can have more types of objectives, and to get it so that the objectives and their current states can be saved to the save file and loaded back correctly. Okay, it has been 2 days now. We're on Monday, so I guess actually only one day, but you may notice that the UI and scene looks a little more empty. That is because I have been working on these objectives and got it so the objectives can now be saved and loaded to my save system. Luckily that was actually pretty easy with my save system at the moment. I just use the same method I've been using for all the other data, so I won't go too much into that. But I have been working on getting it so I can have multiple types of objectives, and one way I thought about stress testing that is by creating a little tutorial at the start of the game. So I got my objective system to have multiple types of goals it can look for and multiple things it can trigger when a goal is done, and I've actually plugged that into my unlock system, so right now in the game pretty much everything is locked. Like, you can't really do anything until you start finishing these objectives, and hopefully I can use this to kind of tutorialize the game. So let me just walk you through this, I guess, very first pass in a tutorial. So right now literally all we can do is just build an engine. So you notice we have no train car, literally nothing in our scene. And the only UI we have is just this build button at the top here. All we can do is just build this single engine car. And you'll notice as soon as I click buy or try and build it, this changed right down here. So that triggered the objective for building a train car, recognized that, hey, we built this engine car, and it triggered the next objective. And as part of that process, it actually unlocked something. So you'll notice we have two tabs here. So now we have this engine car and we have the sleeping car. It also unlocked this little hints, which this will be basically kind of like my guides or index, like codex for the game. I still need to work this out, but it did. Finishing that first objective did unlock this, so our objective system can now have multiple types of goals and trigger multiple things, and if I continue this, it'll unlock more of the game. So the sleeping car, once I build that, you'll notice it triggered the next objective, so now it lets me build a farm car. It also got some more UI, so we can now see our actual people here. And if I build a farm car, which will be under this third tab here, it then next updates the next objective to worker, wants us to assign a worker to the farm. You'll notice it also added this UI, so we can now see our resources here. So all the resources we all now have a resources screen we can view. And that moves us to our next objective, which just press this end turn button. And once we do that, at this point you're kind of done with the tutorial, and all the other UI kind of got unlocked. So we got our map button, our speed controls, our view button, this top bar right here, and kind of two objectives to keep people, players moving forward. I'm not sure if this is the objectives I'll stick with, but for now they've got like their general win condition and maybe something to get them to consider working on building a kitchen to start making up food production. Not sure if this is where I'll keep this going forward, but the things I'm working on right now, or want to work towards, is I went into this wanting to work on my objective system, which I got and working, and part of testing that out has gotten me building this little tutorial, which honestly, building new objective types and having them trigger my unlock system and everything else is actually really straightforward, and thankfully a really streamlined process on the back end. so I can add more types of objectives as the development continues, and I feel really good about that moving forward. One thing this is kind of revealing, though, is this game will need more fleshed out objectives, and we'll really want to think about how to properly do a tutorial, as well as kind of the game loop for the game going forward. So on the tutorial side, I guess that little tutorial you walked through there, I will probably have to play test that to see how well that tutorial makes sense and actually teaches the game. Because I'm realizing that I'm spending a lot of time developing this, and so a lot of the systems in this game make sense to me, but does going through that little process kind of inherently teach other people, like, the main systems and loops behind the game. Beyond that, for the actually fleshing out the objectives themselves, I kind of want, as the game develops, right now your kind of main goal in the game is just to max out this hope. And in my game jam build of the game, the only way you increase this hope was by getting up to the entertainment, working your way up to being able to build the entertainment train car, and that just maximized your hope. And what I want to kind of work towards instead is basically, as the game progresses, you will continuously get, like, kind of random objectives or demands from your people to either make a certain resource or do a certain amounts of things. If you've played Frostpunk, which is what I'm heavily inspiring this game from, in that game, your citizens will kind of occasionally make demands of you, and those kind of create little mini objectives that you can meet, and if you do, it kind of increases the hope for your people, and if you fail them, it increases the discontent. So I'm trying to do exactly that. And I want to make it that kind of, as you progress and move around the map, these objectives will kind of just periodically show up as something you kind of have to do within a set amount of time. And meeting those will hopefully increase your hope, as well as give players incentives to build unique types of train cars, try and figure out how to create large amounts of a certain type of resource they want to give. So overall, basically giving incentives to actually engage with the systems and continuously reconfigure your train, which is one of the main things I want the players to be doing throughout this game. So to that end, a couple things I'm thinking I'm going to have to work on is, one, getting some kind of system that will kind of drip feed those objectives from your people throughout the game as the game goes on. And I know that'll require some balancing tweaks to get that feeling right, but right now I don't even have a system to feed those to you, so I'll need to get that figured out at some point. As well as, I'm definitely realizing a lot of my UI is going to need an animation pass, specifically for these objectives, for them to pop in. As well as, I'm probably going to need to redo or update the UI for these objectives. I'm kind of at least happy with the UI layout of everything else in the scene, but I know with these objectives, I'm not really happy with this kind of little just tab here, especially because it doesn't auto expand, so we've got like some of the text falling off here, and like this text feels very limited in like the amount of text I can add per objective. So I'm thinking I'll have to kind of rethink through how I want this to look. So that's something I need to work on. Another thing I know I want, or will need to work on soon in the future, is getting not so much challenges, but getting the systems in the game working to actually create the pushback and generate the discontent. In previous builds or game jam builds of this game, I had it so that if people didn't have enough food, for example, if there wasn't enough food for people to consume per turn, that would generate discontent. Or if there was more people than there was free housing, that would also generate discontent. As well as a couple other systems. I want there to be like stuff where the storm on the map affects the temperature zone you're in, and for that to affect and damage your train car, as well as I have this idea and system loosely in place where each of these tiles can have a certain snow level that increases as the storms pass over them, and I want that to kind of damage and affect your train car somehow. So overall, still I need to keep working on getting the objectives so players have incentives for stuff to do, as well as working on the challenges so players have something they're kind of working against as they're playing through the game. So I ended up working on the challenges, and there's an easy joke about how challenging those were to work on, as it has been another day of work just to get those done. Sheesh. At this point in the development process, if I want to make one change, there are so many systems that talk to each other that if you set up one wrong thing, can introduce so many bugs that's annoying to work with, especially with the challenges, which touch every system. Like, for example, you can see this 5 out of 4 here up in the top. That's another bug I'll have to fix at some point. That's a small UI bug, I think. Anyway, so challenges. What do I mean by adding challenges to the game? I've worked on making the objectives so people have incentives for stuff to do. You know, they gotta win, they gotta feed their people. But they also need some punishments if they don't meet the objectives or if they don't do certain things. You know, give them incentives in the other direction. So why don't I just run down the challenges I've been adding to the game and kind of show you what they are. A lot of the challenges evolve around basically things you have to do to keep your people alive and healthy and kind of the stuff they need. And failing to meet those challenges will fill up this discontent bar up here. And if you fill that bar out completely, you lose. Game over. You're done. Conversely, doing good stuff, like finishing these objectives, will fill up this hope. And the idea is to finish this bar first before this bar fills up. So, one of the challenges I introduced is your workers need housing. So if you see this little house icon in the top here, you see that means we have 4 free houses out of 10 total. So each of your each of your workers and each of your engineer needs 1 housing, and currently this sleep car gives you 10 housing, or 10 lodging, as I'm calling them. So you need 1 of those per person for them to have housing. And if you don't, which I can show you just by selling this, so you'll notice we now have -6 because we have 6 total people and 0 houses. And if I end the turn, you'll notice this big warning shows up in the top here. This is showing that we have 6 workers who are homeless, who don't have any home, and every turn that there's people who don't have a home, it's going to fill up this discontent bar. So if I continue, you'll notice in the background this filling up. Of course, an easy way to fix that is I can just give people homes. So this doesn't clear right away, but that's fine. It's not actually affecting anything. If I do that, that clears away. You'll notice it didn't add any discontent. You can also see up here, we're back to having a surplus of 4 homes. So as the player acquires more workers and more people, they'll need to keep adding enough housing on, or else they're going to start running into some problems. So that's challenge 1. Challenge 2 is each worker or each person needs food. So we've got this resource called rations, and you start the game with 50, and one of your first kind of main objectives is to make 100 rations. That's because each turn, each of your people will consume 1 ration. So if you notice, I don't know if this actually shows up in the video, but there's a little -6 right here, and we can see we're getting a loss of -6 per turn. So every turn, each of your workers will consume 1 food, and if there's a worker or person who doesn't get a food, they're going to be hungry, they're going to be discontent, and that's going to raise this amount. So one of the very first early objectives you need to figure out in the game is how can I make enough food so people don't go hungry? And that's why this is one of the first objectives I give people. There will be basically a car they have to figure out that they need to build that turns these raw food into rations. And I figured rather than putting that in the tutorial where I kind of force them to do that, I instead make that their first kind of objective that they have to figure out while giving them some amount of rations to give them some time to figure that out. But we can show them getting hungry if I let that food run out. So we're down to 14, 8, 2. So it says -2, but we have 6 total workers, or 6 total people. Yeah, 6 total people. Because we see we got 5 total workers and 1 engineer. That's why calling them all workers is a bit confusing, because they all do work. But workers is a type of person, and engineers is another type. It's a weird, confusing thing. But this says it'll consume 2, but we're also going to get 4 hungry people, because we had 6 total people, but only 2 food, so 4 people didn't eat, and they'll be adding to discontent. And now we will have 6 hungry people, and this will raise the discontent. Now the way you would fix this is, of course, by having enough rations for people. And I currently don't have a way to build the kitchen car, which is the car you'd use to convert the raw food into rations. So I actually have no way of fixing this at the moment. But one of the next things I want to work on is making it so the player can unlock that ability and make that as one of the first things they can make. So the 2 challenges I've shown so far are the fact that lack of housing causes people to be discontent, and lack of enough rations to go around also makes people discontent. And now I have 2 more challenges that I've worked on that I want to show, but in order to show that, I had to reset the scene here. So we're back to this kind of default scene. You'll notice we have all of our rations back. 2 other things that can happen is, so if you notice right here, we're showing the temperature of the current space you are on. And this is a new feature I'm actually kind of happy about, is if we go down here and view temperature here, this shows the warmth of each of these train cars. So you'll notice this is a warmth of 10, 20, 20, and the current temperature is -20. Notice each of these matches the train car's warmth stat. Now at the moment, temperature and warmth, I want to kind of play a big role in kind of how you think about planning where to go on the map. For example, if we take a look at the map here, you can actually view the temperature of each of these spaces around you. And one thing you'll notice is that all of these spaces here are in the storm, and these spaces down here are not. And again, I don't know if video compression makes this legible or not, so let me zoom in. You'll notice that the spaces outside of the storm are a warmer temperature of -10, and those within the storm are a colder temperature, -20. Right now it's just 2 temperatures, 20 and 10. though, I want to basically make it so that being in the storm is much colder than being outside the storm. But okay, sure, being in the storm is colder, being outside is not. Makes sense. What does that actually do for the game? So I want this to do, and it currently does, two things. One, if a train is in a temperature that is colder than its warmth stat, for that train to start taking damage. So if you'll notice, if I pop up the health here, you'll notice that our engine is actually currently sitting at 19 out of 20 health. That's because it has a warmth of 10, but we're in a temperature, the current temperature is 20. So this, I know it's minus 20 is technically less than 10. You know, I might want to change that UI now that I'm thinking about it, just so those negatives are match up to avoid any kind of confusion. But basically, if you take the absolute value of this is if that is greater than or equal to their warmth, or if it is greater than their warmth, then that train car will start taking damage. So if for each turn, you'll notice we're still in a minus 20. This engine is taking damage. You'll notice these cars aren't taking damage. So that's one thing. And to kind of play into this, this sleeping car, even though it currently is showing a warmth of 20, its base warmth is actually only 10, and this plays into some of the strategy I want to kind of have the players figure out and plan around. So if I notice I go into my build window, look at my sleeping car, you notice the base warmth is only 10. So how is this getting a warmth of 20? Well, if we look under info, we'll see it is getting a buff from my engine. So the engine car actually applies a buff of, because the engine is generates a lot of heat, it basically gives the two cars behind it plus 10 warmth. So there'll be a couple other, the plan is to have a couple other train cars that do something similar. But for right now, because the engine car is giving the sleeping car and the farm car plus 10 warmth, it puts their warmth actually up to 20, meaning they don't take any damage in this temperature. I'm not sure if these numbers are exactly the numbers I'll be sticking with, but this kind of shows the idea of what I want this system to be doing. I still need to play around with the exact numbers and buffs to balance between all the train cars, but this is what I want to do. So with the challenge of temperature, if a train car is in something that is colder than its warmth stat, it starts taking damage. But that's only one thing temperature does. Another thing I want temperature to do is for it to start getting your workers sick if they're working in a train car that has its warmth basically below the temperature stat. So let me show this by actually building. If I build another farm car, so I built this third farm car over here, and you'll notice its warmth is only 10. That's because the engine gives plus 10 warmth to the two cars behind it. So this car and this car, not this car. So this car is sitting at plus 10, and if we increase the turn, we'll notice this car is taking damage. Now, if I assign a worker to this car, we'll see if I toggle on the workers view, we'll see that there's one worker in this farm car, which is taking damage, and one worker in this farm car, which isn't taking damage. If I now end turn, we'll notice I get one sick worker, and that's coming from this farm car that is too cold and has a worker in it. Basically, for every turn that this train car is too cold, it'll generate sick people up to, or it'll generate the number of sick people based on the number of workers it has, up to the max amount of sick. Now, the reason this will just keep increasing is because currently, behind the scenes, I am not actually tracking individual workers. So, for example, you would think, oh, this would just increase up to 1 and then stay at 1 because this guy here is sick and he can't get more sick. But at the moment, it will just keep increasing, actually. Of course, if I make it so there's no one working here, now we aren't getting any more sick. Also because that train car got destroyed, but let me just build another one just to demonstrate. No more sick. Ooh, and we're out of food. So that's another thing I want temperature to do. Is basically temperature causes if a train car is if you're in a space where the temperature is greater than a train car's warmth stat, it'll start damaging that train car and start getting the people inside sick. So temperature is a stat I want the players to really be paying close attention to really. This seems kind of harsh, but I really want the players to try and incentivize figuring out how do I keep my train cars as warm as possible, or do I really make sure that I'm avoiding the storm? And right now, like, there's nothing you can do. I'm thinking of tweaking how the storm works, more so in the sense that making it at least start off with like smaller pockets, so it's not like it blankets everything, or giving the players more options to kind of avoid the storm. Because the idea is being inside the storm should be like a worst case scenario. Like I want the game to be designed in a way where the player is trying to move around in a way where they're trying to avoid the storm as much as possible. So that's why getting workers sick and damaging your car is kind of so punishing, because it is something I want the players to be avoiding as much as possible. And right now, it is something they can't avoid as much. So that's something only to work on in the future. But at least as far as challenges go, this system works and is in place, which I like. And one thing I realized I did not mention is so you've got sick people, how do you remove them? And you can actually do that by using I've got a hospital cart. I don't have art for it, but I was just testing the functionality. So this is a train car that heals the sick per engineer. So per engineer you apply, it removes one sick. Now one thing you've got to be careful about is, if you'll notice, this thing's base warmth is only 10. So it heals one sick per turn, but if I were to have applied this train car in such a way that its warmth was only 10, it would be adding one sick per turn and removing one sick per turn, because the engineer hero would be constantly getting sick and it wouldn't actually be doing anything. But right now it should remove a sick per turn and not be generated anymore. So that's another one of the kind of like interesting puzzles I want the players to kind of solve and work around. And let me just show you. We'll see now. Each turn it is removing sick. So yep, now you got no more sick. So your discontent won't be building as fast. Still kind of building because you've got some hungry people. And in fact, we're testing in recording right now. Let's see, we should see this jump up to 11. Yep. Oh, and one homeless. Yep, because we have 11 people and 10 homes. So that is another one of the challenges. So we've got lack of housing adds discontent. Lack of food adds discontent. We have got, if workers are working too cold, they get sick and add discontent. As well as a train car being too cold starts to damage it. As 3 challenges so far. But there's a 4th one that I also worked on. And that has to do with the snow level in the game. So I've again kind of reset to kind of set this up. Ignore the hungry and the max discontent for a while. At the moment, this isn't ending the game. This should end the game right here, but it doesn't. But this is just for demonstration purposes. If I go to my map here, you'll notice that I am looking at my map here. We actually have these 2 numbers on each of these spots. One of them we've already seen, which is the temperature of these spots. So we see these are all 20 because they are within the storm. This other one is the snow level. So snow level, the idea behind it is that as a space is in a storm, more and more snow kind of gets piled up there. And the thinking is that your train should run the risk of taking damage if it goes speeding through the snow. So in this little bottom corner here, you have this speed control, which basically controls how many spaces your train car can move. The thinking is maybe later on the player will be able to unlock more of these. But right now, like, they can move 1, they can move 3, 5, or 7 spaces. The catches against this and why you wouldn't just always just go 7 is because that in order to get or interact with stations or like certain event spaces, you have to land on that space, as well as if you for each space that you move through, even at like speed 7, if you move through a space where the snow level exceeds your front train car's armor level, which I don't have the UI to show that right now, but right now the engine has a base armor of 20, so if it speeds through anything over with a snow level over 20, it'll start taking damage. But if you move at one space, a speed of 1 space, you won't take any damage. So for example, if I go here and I look at my health, I should only see this move down by 1 because of the temperature, because we're in a minus 20 zone and we only have a warmth of 10, but I should just see it move down by 1. So there. However, if I try and speed up and move by 3, and I'll be traveling through spaces where the snow level is higher than my armor level, we'll notice I went all the way down to 16, so I took a lot more damage. So the idea is that the snow level persists even when the storm passes. So the idea is it should be something that the player has to kind of either willingly damage their car to try and, or their train to kind of try and speed through, or be forced to take it slower with the possibility that maybe the storm is coming up behind them. So those are kind of the decisions I want the player to be thinking about when they're interacting with this. Now, at the moment, this challenge I am definitely realizing still needs to, well, for one, it needs to show the UI for the armor for the engine car, so that's one thing I'll need to add. As well as I would like to kind of update the way the visuals for this scene works to better reflect kind of your current speed as well as what space you're on. So something I'm think about maybe adding is, depending on the speed you choose here, that kind of influences both the direction and speed these background assets scroll, as well as the snow particle effects we have going by, either only being around when you're in a storm or like increasing a ton when you're in the storm to kind of further communicate that to the player so they aren't having to hop over here and check as much between turns. I don't want them. Ideally, you should be looking at here to like plan for a little bit, but I don't want them hopping back and forth between both of those, like between every turn, essentially. So that's the kind of 4th challenge I worked on. So we have basically homelessness adds discontent, lack of food adds discontent, lower temperatures can damage train cars and cause sick people, and speeding in the snow is a bad idea. So those are the 4 challenges I worked on. They, like I mentioned earlier, took a bit to figure out just because, or not design-wise, but implementation, just because my project is at the point where I have a lot of systems talking to each other, so I'm just getting a lot of weird bugs. Clearly, still some more work to do. One other, not so much challenge, but limitation I want to add is I want to make it so that you can only move if you have an engine car. Right now, there's a kind of funny thing you can do where I can sell this engine, so I don't have an engine, but I can still end my turn, and I can still move my train around, which isn't something you should be able to do. Beyond that, I would like to basically start adding some audio, as well as improving at least some of these like objective UI, and start to figure out some balance stuff. So I will get back to you when I have something more to show.